Paul, thanks for doing this. Can I ask you about the temperature of this division this year? You just left a bit of a bonfire in the Toronto market after taking 2 or 3 from them. Had a couple of coaching changes in Calgary and Montreal, and seems like everything gets exacerbated in this unique season. What's your vantage point from behind the Jets bench?
I would say that's 100% correct and very accurate, Pierre. But we knew that going in and talked about um, the exaggeration of all things and not being a part of that, being able to stay off that idea. It's difficult to do. Maybe made slightly easier for players because there's no fans in the building, and that takes some of the intensity out of it for us. It just does. But the idea that, you played a great game Saturday night and won, while you're right there and you're a contender, but the game before you were a disaster and we're going to have to fire somebody for it. So fortunately, I work for people that have an even keel and an understanding of what we're in. So I don't feel that here, but it's real. And we've tried to keep our team off that. And it's also a function of what everybody's going through in the sheer number of games stacked into a short season. So there's more, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but because it's shorter, there's more of an urgency to stay off bad runs and to try to get on a good run because of the length. But you get the opportunity to go right back at it, which can be really good for you. Or, sometimes you feel like you need a 2 or 3 day block just to hit the reset button, if you will. So there's a bunch of things that you got to be really aware of in terms of the emotions of your team. And I think trying to make sure that in the leadership of your group, you have that maybe a little bit detached of the day to day, a little bit of an overview and a longer term picture helps manage some of the emotions.
We'll go next to Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Gregor. Thanks, Paul. Just another sort of bigger picture question here, Paul. We're going to be talking to Kevin Cheveldayoff shortly today. We're less than a month to the trade deadline. I guess, how much are you in Kevin's ear saying, maybe we could use this or that, or, just kind of looking at what's out there? Is that something you do a whole lot of? And does this year present its own unique challenges in that department?
Well, the challenge is, aside from the idea of trying to get a guy across the border and what that would mean, is that if you're pre-scouting, you can look at, we all know a guy. If you fire a guy's name out, we have a general idea, but truly you got to go back and watch a lot of video on a guy before you can get a good handle on what he is. Even if you're in the league, you still have to do that kind of work. There's not as much time to do that. For our, we all have our ideas of where we could improve, but a month is a long time. What your team is today, you'll have players develop. You'll find new things about players because we play, 17 games this month. Health alone will dictate a lot of what people are thinking going into that trade deadline. So I'll give my opinion. There'll be a time and place for that somewhere over the next month. We'll start talking about where our team's at. And we'll do the research that I'm asked to do on players that are available. But it's certainly so far down kind of that list for me right now, we won't talk about it.
We'll go next to Scott Billick from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, Paul. Nikolai Ehlers, you've coached him since the day he got here. Where is he now? What has changed in his game from then to now, and why, or what has he done this year? And I assume it's a progression, so he's followed a line, but what has turned him into kind of the player he is today?
Well, time is the big one, right? And I think with Nikolai, that like all 18, 19-year-old players, they come in, you see the glimpses of greatness because he's such a skilled kind of elite skater and exciting to watch. And you knew it was like 1 and 4, right? And now we're getting to see Nikolai on display. He's physically stronger. That means a lot to him because he's able to come into this really heavy schedule. We do monitor his minutes for that alone. But I think what he's got now this year, he's on a line where he knows if it's on his stick, he should think shoot the puck. right? He's not trying to get it to Patrick. He's not trying to defer to a veteran center. He's become his own pro. So he knows his game. He knows what he's capable of doing. He's doing it consistently because he's got time in the league, and he has a better definition of what his skill set is. And that if I got it on my stick, everybody on the bench, and if there were people in the stands, wants me to shoot this puck, right? So it's faster. So less all of the things these young guys go through, and anybody who's 21, 22 is still kind of trying to figure that out, right? Want to keep people happy, want to play the game to keep my teammates happy, and Nikolai's just going out and playing his game now. It's pretty impactful for our team.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, good morning, Paul.
Morning, Kelly.
Would it be accurate to say that no division rival has frustrated you or at least given you fits in terms of trying to play your game consistently that Montreal has?
I thought when the division got put out, there were two teams that I didn't like the way we played against Calgary, and I didn't like the way we played against Montreal. Montreal is a little bit of a tougher animal because it's only twice a year. Calgary, at least we play 3 times a year. And I've liked our last game is an exception, we hope. But I've liked the way we've played against Montreal better this year than, we can remember the 52 shot performance, I think, that they put up on us in Montreal. I think we've been much, much better than them, but there's a truth to that, right? There's a handful of teams in the NHL whose style, for whatever reason, you just can't get a grip on. And you're hoping they're not in your conference. Usually they're a little bit out. You never get a handle on them. You don't play them enough to get a handle on them. So hopefully this year, with all the games that we play against Montreal, we can get to a better understanding of what it is that we need to do to beat them regularly.
We'll go next to Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weaver.
Morning, Paul. What's the most important lesson you've learned about your group during the first half of the season?
I think they like each other. I think that's the thread that's kind of going through our room right now, is that they hang together. The bench is connected. They support each other. When I watch them move around each other in practice or at meals, it's different groups of guys all the time. It's not the same guys together. There's a nice connection in that room, and that's really, really important when you have a tough night like we had in Montreal, to kind of get back on the horse and get back. It's not a disjointed group. They're, a group of close-knit guys.
We'll go next to Carter Brooks from Game On. Go ahead, Carter.
Hi, Paul. Of the 27 games you guys have played this year, there's only been 13 games in which both, or one of, Pierre-Luc Dubois or Patrick Laine is a participant. Those 14 games without them, the team is 8-5-1. What can you say about the resilience of this crew so far?
Well, you know what? I'm going to tie your question to the question that Ken just asked about what have you learned? Because after I answered that question, I thought there might be something different here. So Ken, you can take this as the answer to your question as well if you want, and I'll sub it in. So what it would be this: I think they're a smart group of guys. So I think when they watch the game, so we've had a number of games that we've been down in games and we've come back, or we had a tough night and then we were good the next night. I think this group has a really good understanding of what they're seeing on the ice. And so they know what, by the time they get off the bench, how they played, what they needed to do better. And in games down 2-1, there's not a panic on our bench. We know we got a bunch of guys who can score goals. So there's a resilience to our team, and I'm going to put it to maybe intelligence. They know what they're seeing, right? I don't have to really go in and tell them what's missing or what we got to do next. I think they have a good understanding of that. At the very least, when you explain it to them, they kind of go, okay, that makes sense. Let's go in that direction, right? So I felt that in games that we were not good, we knew it. And there haven't been a whole lot, but in periods of games we struggled, they've been able to make an adjustment and come back and get strong. And we've come back and won a bunch of games, or won a bunch of games when we didn't score the first goal or we were trailing at a point in time. And it's not just we played harder, we played probably a little smarter, got a little more defined in our game, and we stayed patient throughout that game.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Gregor. Hey, Paul. I want to go back to that conversation you had about Kevin and, potentially looking for players. I get that. I'm a little interested by you doing the back research on players that he may bring to you. I'm wondering, has there been any of those conversations yet, or are there players you've talked about with him that there's an understanding that if Kevin can get them, you feel that they're going to fit in here?
No, it works a little different like that. Like the first thing that happens is that, there's kind of like a group of players populated, and that's not even, and sometimes that's by the media, right? There's names out there and you just start kicking those names around, and then it's kind of like we're secondary, right? There's an entire pro scouting division that they're working on this stuff all the time. So we're doing our jobs here, and then Kevin's not running down with every name that's rumored to be out there. It'll get to a point where that it's kind of confirmed, maybe a name's out there and that it might have interest, and then we'll dig in a little bit. But we got a whole group of full-time professionals that will handle this before it ever gets to me. So it's not a big burden on the coaching staff. It's not what we do for a living.
We'll go next to Scott Billick from the Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, Paul, back on Nikolai here. You mentioned earlier just a little bit about kind of monitoring his minutes. I would, maybe you'll know this, but the fan base would like to see him play more.
Right.
And the only plays, I think he's averaging about 17 minutes a night this year. Why is that? Like, why doesn't a guy like Nikolai, with his skill set, with what he's able to do analytically, why doesn't he get obviously he plays on the second line, but why doesn't he get maybe 20 minutes a night?
I guess the simple answer is he's having a lot of success, and the people that I want Nikolai to play against aren't playing 20 minutes. Right. So there's a group, or in any given game, there's a set of defensemen that I'd kind of like Nikolai to play against, and there's a set of forwards on the other team that I'd like him to play against. And we have a history knowing that when we play him against certain styles of players or certain lines, that those analytics are going to look fantastic, right? And then maybe in other situations where I play him against a different set of D, those numbers aren't quite as good, and he gets worn down and he's not nearly as good a player. So I would suggest that we're really, really happy with Nikolai, that we really, really like him, and that he's playing the minutes that are good for him and good for the Winnipeg Jets. It's better for the Winnipeg Jets if he plays the minutes he's playing. But I get it from a fan base, right? Because when Nikolai gets on the ice, I'm excited to see him too. Right? Like that, like I enjoy when he gets out there. So we try to do our best to pick the right spots. I think he's at the right level right now.
Just a few more for Paul. We'll go next to Jason Bell from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jason.
Hey, Paul, good to talk to you again. Mason Appleton, and if this has been covered already today, I've been out of the loop for a couple of weeks. I do a lot of reading and following along, but as far as a specific question about Mason, I mean, when did you start to identify that this guy could be a bona fide NHLer? I mean, 6th-round draft choices can fall off the radar really darn quick. And
Yeah.
Obviously he had great work in the AHL, but was there something even before that or something right after that?
No, you know what transpired with Mason is he came to us kind of as a certain kind of player, and he was good at it. But in truth, there may be other players that were better at that style of game. And what he was able to do then was to adjust his style of game to maybe something that he's great at. So he's very quick. He's got a good stick, and he's become a relentless player, right? He's on the forecheck, he's on the back check, he has good defensive reads, and he's highly competitive. But his training camps early on, I mean, I think there's a certain physical strength, almost a certain physical capacity that you have to get to be able to play that style of game. You got to be a very fit man. You got to be a very strong man to go as hard as he does shift after shift. So his training camps were almost, you didn't notice him, right? Almost uninspiring. And then in the second half of the year, he got to that strength and that quickness, and he got strong and fast, and he faced something there. And I think really what happened was Mason himself figured out, I can play this style of game in the NHL and be a really good player. It's different than the style of hockey I've played in the past. All of these young players who come to us come as skilled guys, not necessarily perimeter guys, but you don't get drafted and play in the NHL because you're usually a grinder. You either accept that role because that's probably where you're going to make your living, or you don't. And he's accepted it. Now, he's starting to excel at it. So we do think there's hands there. And we do think there's a certain kind of offense there from him, but it's the kind that he's delivering right now, drive the net, get in on the forecheck, make some plays close to the net. So he has to truly, he's the guy that deserves all the credit for it, because he recognized it when we felt that this was a whole form. This was a place for you to go from fourth line to third line. For us, it would be on the Lowry line. It would be this style of hockey. If you weren't able to do that, you're either going to have to, at the time, beat out Wheeler or Patrick Laine on the right. And now it's Ehlers or Wheeler on the right in that style. And those guys probably do different things than you do, but you can do this job and you can do it exceptionally well. And maybe even exceed some expectation, because you do have some hands and you did put up points in the American League. But he deserves the credit for this. He put in the work and he made the adjustment, and he's defined his game very well.
And final question to Ken Weave from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weaver.
What can you tell us about the lineup and maybe how you'll start your pairings tonight, Paul?
Yeah, we'll start the way we finished, Ken. Connor Hellebuck's going in goal, but the rest will stay the same.